one of the roadmaps that the conclave's been following is there's going to be 3 sort of significant indicators, issuing some kind of a climate change initiative, calling together a summit of all the world's major religions, announcing this worshiping Gaia mantra or dictum, bowing down to environmentalism, essentially combining the UN with the church. Now, that is a system that's really developing right before our eyes. And again, we're talking about the beast of Revelation 13. The world really is in love with whatever Pope Francis says. I find that so fascinating.
Fascinating and scary. So I think a connection can be made between Agenda 21 and this upcoming papal encyclical, but also his presentation before the United Nations. If people don't know what Agenda 21 is, they can just Google and read about it. Basically, it's a UN-sponsored program, but it has some scary power. It would give power to the United Nations to effectively force local governments to comply with sustainability ideas. So in other words, the government, they could curtail your freedom to move about, to travel, monitor how much gas you use in your car, or if you even can own a car, whether you could live in the suburbs. Can you raise your own gardens? Can you live off-grid? Not likely. And as a matter of fact, Agenda 21 objectives would limit even if you could raise a family. It'd be very much like the China program. How many kids can you have? It would eliminate private property rights. Basically, it would become eminent domain on steroids. It would say the government has a need and a right to ultimately have control over all of your properties. So you couldn't own private property anymore. In that sense, it's also Marxist. It's also socialist, as this Pope is pushing. And in his encyclical, we haven't read it yet, but he's going to give it in front of the United Nations. It's definitely going to use religious language, we already know that, to talk about moral imperatives, but it's going to address so-called climate change. And because he's using the phraseology already in his public presentations about, quote, human ecology, we already know he's going to place the blame for what ails the world on terrible humans doing terrible things to this wonderful divinity ecosystem known as Gaia, which you've written about. And I want to know a lot more about the book that you've written and that we hope to be able to publish. But the point is, doing this before the United Nations literally could mark the ascension of Petrus Romanus as the universal monarch of a new world order. And if it does, and it definitely could, then we're looking at the unfolding of potentially some of the greatest prophecy in the history of mankind. And this Pope's out there right now. What's interesting, years ago, one of the very first books I ever wrote, I talk about how when the Antichrist would appear, he would impose universal socialism. The other day I was trying to remember why 30 years ago would I have said that. What was in my mind at the time that would have made me believe that the final world order, the Antichrist, the false prophet, would be champions of universal socialism? And I think it's because socialism tends to take away from the individual their own power. It basically, you work for the state. You work for the government. Everybody's made common. There's no capitalistic society anymore. And in that sense, they kind of own you. And now you have this Pope out there. He's already arguing for a radical new financial economic system that combines socialism with divine ecosystem environmentalism. So you have a brand new gospel that is coming out. It's anti-capitalistic. Most of the people that are alive today don't know enough about prophecy or the Bible, or for that matter, even American history, to understand why this is both astonishing and scary, that you have the president of the most powerful nation on earth who is repudiating what most of the people who fought in the great wars and died to preserve were fighting for. And next to him, next to this political authority, you have the world's greatest religious authority championing the same thing. Go out and read all of his latest commentary on this, where he's demonizing those that disagree with, he doesn't call it Marxism, but it's Marxism. He's calling the free market system an economic system centered on worship of the god of money and the dynamics of an open free economy and finance. He's calling that a system that is based on lacking in ethics. So if you believe in free market capitalism, which I certainly do, well, then you are possessed by demons. You're possessed by the demons of mammon. You lack genuine ethic.
Tom, following that train of thought, he should start selling off the Vatican property, the Vatican furniture, and all the, the treasury. I think it's important that people understand that it's always like Margaret Thatcher said, the problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. But the thing that people are missing is a real message. Basically, look at the way the leaders come, and I'll say this because I certainly don't want to offend anybody, kiss his hand or kiss his ring, okay? Mm-hmm. I'm just saying this is when he goes into the United Nations, that will be the symbolic gesture of addressing the whole, quote, body politic of the world, and he will basically be presenting himself as universal monarch of the one world government. Because, remember, this is the same Pope who made the statement, there is no such thing as personal salvation in Jesus Christ. Do you remember that?